coming today. I want to welcome our presenter for today, Dr. Hand. He's going to be talking on conducting a self-review of your online course, all sorts of tips and tricks. Please feel free to help yourself to as much pizza as possible. And then I hope you guys enjoy the presentation.
Well, thank you everybody for coming this afternoon. I hope that I make this presentation non-dry, interesting, and hopefully very, very helpful. It's hard for me to even think about the fact that I've been teaching online now for 12 years. But if I think back far enough, I remember how I started, and it wasn't with Blackboard, eCollege, or any other fancy system. We started out with Outlook Express with news groups. All written media, no audio, no video. We've certainly come a long way from there. So from that, I've also been involved with developing a lot of different courses in nursing and healthcare, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level, although the graduate level is where I spend my time today here in the College of Nursing and Health Professions. I've been quite involved with self-review and peer review activities. In fact, I did 2 peer reviews this fall for peers, one in my discipline and then one in dental. So I've had quite a bit of experience with that. I am a certified Quality Matters peer review, among other things, but what I would say, you do not need to be a QM reviewer to do a self-review of your own course and to do it relatively well. Okay. So my goals for today, I'd like to provide some tools, questions, and some guidance for you as you consider self-review of your online course. I want to provide some examples and some suggestions concerning evidence within courses, and I've actually taken some screenshots out of some of my courses because I thought having a visual might be helpful in terms of seeing what the possibilities are. And hopefully I can give you some ideas to augment your review and maybe some of your current practices. So for those of you, how many of you are familiar with Quality Matters? And how many Quality Matters reviewers do we have in here? One, okay. So I'm just going to quickly go over the standards and the layout. This rubric was actually just updated this year. So based on a Quality Matters perspective, Standard 1 looks at the overview and introduction of the course, followed by then learning objectives, assessment and measurement, instructional materials, course activities and learner interaction, technology, learner support, accessibility, and usability. And all of those standards, if you're doing a formal QM review, all of those standards would be looked at. Okay? But this is to give you some context. That being said, you do not have to be a QM reviewer to do an effective self-review of your course, and a robust one at that. Okay? What I believe about self-review, it's not a one-size-fits-all methodology. And you're going to have to think about that, within the context of your own courses, within the context of your discipline, and what it is that you're going to need to do to best meet your needs. And you can have a well-structured course based on alignment and standards, but there can still be holes and problems, okay? And when you do a thorough review, you're really looking beyond that structure and alignment because the truth and reality of experience does matter. It does matter. Hopefully you'll ask the hard questions, and I believe the best thing to do, maybe not necessarily 100% right in every case, is to begin and end with the syllabus, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. Okay, timing of your review and when is the best time? What I would say about this, it really depends on the purpose. What is it you're wanting to accomplish in this review? If it's an active course, are you willing to make real-time improvements? Is that what you're planning to do based on student feedback? Are there problems that you want to try to correct? Okay. A completed course, are you really wanting to go back and look at everything and do a holistic review of the course? If that is the case, then doing it retrospectively is a good idea. Another opportunity might be to do it before you're having a peer review. You do a review and then also have a colleague do a review on the course. So you have an opportunity to compare and contrast those findings. What did your peer discover? And in addition, what might you have discovered that they did not? Because after all, you're the one who knows the most about your course. So 2 lenses of opportunity there. Okay. From my perspective, I believe when you do a review, it works very, very well to begin and end with the syllabus. And what I did was I put 2 sample checklists in the packet of information that they've made copies of. And what I would say with these are just samples, and I encourage you to take them, do what you want with them. If you want to add things, take out things, customize them to meet your needs. So just to give you an idea, when I go through a syllabus for me or for our department, I would be looking at course information, faculty information based on what's in the checklist, student guidelines and behavioral standards, program accreditation, competencies, and outcomes, because we're a regulated discipline. So you may not have so many things that are so specific in that area, and you can certainly eliminate those if you don't need them. Course objectives, textbooks, and required materials, course delivery and due dates, assignments and methods of evaluation, and supplemental documents. And I mention supplemental documents because the common practice in our area, and every college and discipline is different, is that we do most faculty do a separate course calendar that maps out the course by week, and they also do separate documents that detail and delineate specific guidelines and requirements for particular assignments. That being said, there's nothing wrong with including that information in your course syllabus if you choose to. The only issue is it may become quite lengthy, so it's just something to think about, okay? So I'm really looking at these items the first time, and I'm going through the syllabus from front to back pretty much, okay? The second review is actually looking more focused, and there are about 4 key items that I'll look at, and we'll talk about this more later, but really comparing the syllabus items against course evidence. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just take you through some basic questions, and you're going to see some of the flavor of quality matters here, but just some logical things to look at. Okay. Structure and navigation. Do students know where to start? Very good question. How many of you teach in the earlier courses, the first year or otherwise, anything online in that regard? What do you typically have to do with students to get them to where they need to go with Blackboard?
I actually have it in 2 places. Right at the beginning there it says start here, and then there's also one of the folders.
Ah, okay. Okay. Yeah, this is just one suggestion, and I've kind of started building my course menus pretty consistently. I teach in a specialty track, so I have a lot of the same students across courses, and I just find it makes sense not to move things around from course to course. It drives them a little bit crazy. So if they know where to start, the first place that they can go is my course menu. And I've made this not only obvious for them, but also if I were to have a review of my course, it's fairly obvious where the student needs to go to get started. And once they click that open, then in that folder, I've got my course overview video, the syllabus, the calendar, key competency documents, and also the required student handbook is in there too. So this is just a simple way to give you some obvious evidence in a course about where students know where to go to start. Of course, if they've never been in Blackboard, you may have to direct them how to get there too. Okay. Okay. Are the course objectives clear, measurable, and connected to content? And do I have any evidence of this? And you know, I changed my practice recently because I had to ask myself this question, okay? I've got course objectives, and we, in our college, definitely, and department, will marry these to specific competencies, but did I have anything in the course that clearly connected where we were addressing what course objective? So I had to give this some thought. And so what I've begun to do was to map our course objectives to the specific topics and week. So what I do, and when I go into the content section of my course, then I have my content organized by week and topic, and what I've done then is identify the specific objectives and associated competencies that are applicable to that week. So it's very clear to the student what we're focusing on that particular week. This is just a suggestion, and you have that space. When you build a content folder, you have an area where you can put narrative and description, so that's where I've chosen to put these objectives and the competencies. Okay? Just an idea. Okay. Another question, does the course include evidence of substantive guidance concerning preparation of course assignments and grading? Another question I ask myself, okay, what evidence do I have, and what would be an example of this evidence? Okay, this is my 632 course, Administration of Nursing and Healthcare Organizations. So what do I typically include? And this assignment is a literature review. So My practice has been to provide a video overview of the assignment as well as written guidelines. It seems to be that, and in my experience, this has reduced quite a few of the questions that I have. So I include that. I include written guidelines with grading criteria. I also included some supplemental documents for further guidance on how to do a literature review and some examples. So these are some examples of evidence that I could provide in terms of substantive guidance for preparing that assignment. You don't have to do this much. You need to do as much as you need to do, and it's going to depend on the complexity of the course you have and exactly what it is you're asking students to do. So this is just one example. Any questions so far? How are we doing? Okay. Okay, another example here is for that substantive guidance. I use electronic rubrics in Blackboard. How many of you do that? Okay. I do, and you can make them as simple and complex as you want. I use a holistic rubric with point ranges because I do a lot of qualitative comments on assignments. You may want an analytical where you can have point ranges and numbers. Think about how your brain works, okay? But this is another example of substantive evidence in terms of guidance for grading that the student that you can look for and your reviewer can look for. Okay. A next question. Do students really have multiple opportunities to track their progress? Now that may sound like somewhat like a sarcastic question. Really? Well, but it's not. Okay. Do you have a variety of assignments? Okay, that'd be one thing. Do you have evidence of timely feedback and notification? In other words, think about this, because it's a question we don't always like to ask ourselves as busy as we are. How long has it been, or how much time has transpired from the time that the assignment was submitted to the time it gets returned to the student? Okay. That's something to think about. And in places that you can look, of course, you can look at in your grade center to see dates, to see how long it took you. Also, the thing I do, which is much easier, is I post an announcement when I post grades and feedback for an assignment, and then I also click the feature to go ahead and send that to the students so that they're aware of it too at the time. But that's something that you can look for as well, and kind of looking at that. And you may want to look at too and say, okay, how's this working out with what I said I was going to do in the syllabus? And maybe perhaps you've scheduled yourself too tight of a time frame that it's not realistic, or perhaps maybe you need to adjust some priorities in order to be able to meet that. Just some things to think about. Also, what about posting of early alerts and midterm grades? How many of you are using that, the early alert? Okay, got a couple of you are, especially in the early courses. Midterm grades? Okay. I teach at the graduate level, but I will tell you I post midterm grades now. I absolutely do. It may be a smaller amount of content, but it is another opportunity to provide some timely feedback for students to be able to track their progress and realize where they're at, usually before the withdrawal date. So just some ideas. There are lots of other things that you can do, but this is just a few suggestions that you might think about. Okay. Instructional materials, are they appropriately organized and properly cited? Okay. Again, another example, if I'm looking for evidence, what I do, how many of you use permalinks, library permalinks for resources? Okay. Yeah. I tend to use the permalinks because if it's something I'm going to require, then I put it in the course and there's no excuse for the student not to have it or read it if they say I can't locate it. But then you can also require that they use more literature beyond what you put in there too, is another opportunity. But I do tend to permalink items to the course also because that way I know for sure that they're there.
I've gone to using PDFs. I open them up, do a PDF, and attach it because sometimes there might be connectivity problems. So.
The only thing I would say about that might be a good question to ask the library about posting versus linking because of the Millennium Copyright Act. That's why I went to linking, because then I eliminate the issue. And then of course I include an APA citation, and which I'll mention again in a minute. The other thing I have here is just a short blurb of why I've included that particular item in the list. So it's a little bit more clear to the students as to why it's there and what are some things that they can glean. I don't go on and on forever, but about maybe a sentence or two to explain why it's there and some things to think about. Okay? Yeah, again, the question of when you're looking at instructional materials, is there evidence to indicate why a particular item or piece of material has been included? At the graduate level, I will tell you, I assign a lot of reading, but I have to be careful because I may think this is all wonderful for the student to read, but I also have to think about, are they really going to read it? Maybe they will and maybe they won't. So there needs to be some kind of indication here, okay? Clear from the information what items are required or optional, and I try to include that in the narrative as well, or if this is a supplemental reference to help to clarify a particular concept. Again, and I use a variety of things. I permanently library articles. I also use ebooks. The eBury Academic Complete, just an FYI, if you're using Safari, it's going away. So, but I do use it for certain things, particularly if there's one chapter or one small section. I don't want the student to pay for the whole book. So another suggestion. Learning activities and interaction. Okay. What kind of activities, and I would ask you all this, what kind of activities do you include your course in your courses, online courses in particular, that call for interaction?
That wasn't a rhetorical?
No, it wasn't rhetorical. I was asking the audience here.
I do discussion boards.
Mm-hmm.
I also have students make specific comments on voice threads. Mm-hmm. They answer a question or look at a document and post their responses.
Okay. Yeah. The next question I would ask is, do the guidelines for that particular activity specify amount, substance, and quality of the interaction required? Okay. I've learned this from experience, maybe right or wrong, that if I'm not more specific, I may get more in volume, but not more in substance. Okay. So this is one example of a discussion item in my course, and some of the things I've underlined here are the required number of references that I require the students to include in a discussion post, how many of these need to be from a peer-reviewed journal, how many peer responses that they're going to need to do in that particular activity, and then also the expectation, which I didn't include before, but I learned, is that they are expected to respond substantively to questions that are posed by the faculty. Okay, so this is just an example again where there are guidelines and some directives in terms of what is expected for the student and what they need to do. So, from my perspective, it helps the student in terms of doing something that is substantive and meaningful, and helping them to understand that perhaps more is not better. Okay. Again, and this didn't show up very well, but this is really just a simple rubric that I use for grading the discussion, rating from 10 to all the way down to 0 to poor. But I do use it, and I use this is a broad rubric because I don't use different ones for each discussion board because, depending on how many you have in a course, that can get a little bit maddening. And at least this way they have a clear understanding of how this is going to be graded, and I don't deviate from it from one assignment to the next. Okay, but again, it's another piece of guidance because it's not just in there for me to do the grading, but the students can also see this. Okay. Course technology and links. Just some question to ask yourself. In terms of technology, do you need it? Do you need the particular technology that you're going to use to accomplish what you need to? Okay, and if you need it, how familiar are you with it? Okay, that's just something to think about. I've done this long enough, and I guess I've become a little old and crotchety in this regard, that I don't use technology unless I have a reasonably strong proficiency in terms of troubleshooting it and fixing problems. Because we do have tech support, but at the same time, if it's the weekend, it could be a different issue. So just something to think about as you're reviewing your course. What kind of technology are you using? Do you need it? Does it work? And also think about what kind of technological issues you've had using it. And you might also think about what other options do I have if it's not working as well as you think it could. Okay? And certainly do all the links you have in your coursework. Whether you're doing a self-review or you're doing a new setup every semester, you want to go through everything that you've got from front to back to make sure that it works, that it has not been moved, or there's been another problem. And again, if you have anything from the Safari database now, you're going to want to do something about that. Accessibility, I didn't put a lot here. Quality Matters talks quite a bit about that. How simple is the navigation? Information concerning technology. If you're going to ask students to do something with VoiceThread, do you have any kind of as you do your review, what kind of evidence do you have that shows that you've got guidance for the students in terms of how you use it? One example might be, I have a Camtasia VoiceThread tutorial that I include in courses that show students how to step-by-step create a VoiceThread presentation, and then also to share that and make it accessible for the group. Okay. Design and color scheme promoting readability, just another question. And I'll tell you something, that really came through loud and clear as I was looking at what screenshots to put in this presentation. I realized, oh, I don't know that I want to use that again because I had red on a different background and it just did not show up well. And depending, you might have an accessibility issue depending on what kind of reader a student may be using, if they've got any kind of equipment that they need to augment their learning. At this point in time, we don't have anybody in our college, but you could have somebody that's going to need different technology, and it could make a difference. Okay. In self-review, and I do believe it's important, is I want to hear from the students, and I would suggest, it is an act of bravery. Sometimes you're opening yourself up to hear what they have to say. Okay. What do they have to say, and and what kind of feedback that they're going to give you? And so what I suggest that you might start with would be the questions from the USI FACT or EFACT process, and these came out of the Office of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. Do not think you'd have to limit yourself to these questions, but these are just some basic questions to at least get started. In an online course, you can certainly send an email. You could do a survey. In Blackboard is another option, and asking these basic questions about what helps their learning, what are the hindrances, and also any suggestions they might have to make about the course. And then I encourage you to think about, are there other specific questions that might be relevant to your own discipline that would be important to include there as well too? Are there things that could augment this? I don't think there's any right or wrong question as long as you're open and prepared for what the response might be.
Michael, I wonder, it just occurred to me, it might be helpful to do something like this at the beginning of a class in order to assess what kinds of things do students find most helpful, things like that, so that you could incorporate that into the class.
You absolutely could. You absolutely could do that. And if you're new to online teaching, it might be a wonderful thing to do because it'll give you a little bit of a sense, as you're coming into this, what have the students experienced? Because you can learn, truthfully, you can learn a lot from them. And I found things that students have suggested, even basic little changes that you may not think mean so much, but it matters the world to them in terms of clarity and other things. So, one thing I would say here is if you're going to pose questions, you need to be prepared to respond. Okay? Don't ask the question if it's going to go on into the circular file or the inbox and never be seen or heard from again. Okay? So this is my suggestion. Again, you can do it in lots of different ways. What I tend to do is I take time to digest those responses, okay, and then identify what the key themes are in those responses and what I've derived from that, okay. I take a look at those and see, okay, what are the recommendations that are reasonable? What is doable, okay? So that would be what I would put under the items that I'm considering enhancing in the course, okay? What are the items that are non-negotiables? Okay, I teach graduate courses. Yes, I do hear from time to time that they don't like doing that huge paper or that major project. Okay, that would probably fall into the non-negotiable item, depending on what the needs of the course are. So that could become a non-negotiable. Or it may be that looking at that project, they may have a suggestion. It could be that they suggest, could we divide that into 2 segments? That might be something to think about, depending on how the project flows. And there are some opportunities there. But also being clear about what those non-negotiable items are, and be sure to thank them for their participation and help them to know and understand that what you've asked them to do really matters. It isn't just something that you're doing for the sake of doing it. Okay? But I have to admit, doing this, I have learned a lot. And I've also been using I've been doing an EFACT since I've been here. Basically, we're required to have 1 peer review in our college a year, and I've been doing 1 every semester. And what I've tried to do, and you could do the same with self-review, is I try to do it the second time I offer the course, because the first time, there's natural, you're just trying to get the basic bugs worked out. But the second time, then, is to really take a look at, okay, what can I learn here? Okay. What I do next, I tend to do next here, would be to go back to the syllabus again, and I want to look at 3 key items, okay? These are policy related, but I think they're important considerations as we look at quality of grading, quality of student feedback, and also grading issues. Now, I've been in academia now for about 12 years, and what I can tell you is, and I've had to sit on grade grievance committees, nothing more painful, But policies definitely have a lot to do with the outcome of that. Timely feedback definitely has a lot to do with the outcome of that. And also, using the delineated grading criteria in the feedback process has a lot to do with that. So that's why I suggest going back and, again, looking at the syllabus again, looking at your course and seeing if you have consistent or sooner turnaround time for your graded assignments as indicated in your syllabus. I say 2 weeks. It's never 2 weeks, but I want to give myself some cushion to be realistic. If their work was submitted late, have you applied your late policy consistently? Okay. And that can be different depending on the discipline that you're in and the level of course that you're teaching. Okay. And then also is that there's evidence that the grading criteria that you've indicated has actually been used in the grading process, and there's clear evidence of that. So whether it's a rubric or other element, and the feedback, reflects that. It's just something, really to ask those hard questions and make sure that, that we're being consistent in what we've indicated that we're going to do, that we do. I encourage everyone to summarize your findings. Okay. I included a sheet, and this is actually simply, we do our graduate program, and I got permission just to adapt this just a little bit. And this can be used to summarize your findings from the course, what you've learned from the self-review, and also to include any other specific issues that you've identified, in this process. Okay. There are issues that are going to emerge in any course. Okay, so, these are important things to think about and consider. And also looking at your discoveries. What did you learn in the process of doing a self-review on your course? What are the things that emerged for you? What recommendations did you have from the last time you taught the course? And also, what did you do with those? What kind of recommendations emerged for you again from your self-review this time? Where are you situated at this point based on what you know now? What would you do differently? Okay. Changes that you made in the course offering that you're looking at, and also any other changes that you're considering to make prior to offering the course the next time. Now, this is not a beautifully perfect formula for a summary. It's just some ideas and suggestions, because you have to have some kind of a starting point to do this. This needs to be a positive experience, in my opinion, and I do believe that USI does a very good job as we look at peer review and course review of approaching this from a positive perspective, and I think we have to keep our minds, as we do our own self-review and reflection, situated in a positive mindset too, that this is can be a very enlightening and enriching experience. And one of the things I found for me as I'm doing this is that I find my commitment to teaching and improving my teaching, this adds to that. It truly does, from my perspective. You may want to include this summary as part of your academic portfolio. Okay? Great opportunity. And if there's particular evidence that you want to include. Again, what I've suggested here, I've tried to give this a broad perspective because we have lots of different people here. And depending on the college that you're in, they may have different ideas and recommendations and things that are going to be specific for your discipline that you need to do. And you definitely want to do those. You want to do those, especially if you're preparing documents for your academic portfolio and so forth. What I would say is this process takes time, okay? You're not going to be able to go through your course and effectively look at everything in just a little bit. This is going to take you a few hours. You've got to block time to be able to do that, okay? Structure and standards are key. That's why Quality Matters exists. But also the delivery piece of it, we can't ignore that as well too. And looking back at that evidence and looking at what transpired during that course. And I think that's one of the great advantages that we have in online education is the permanent nature of what we have in the course, and we have the opportunity to go back and really digest and look at that evidence and say, oh, or oh, that's what I thought I did, but maybe not, okay? Again, student input can be helpful, but then again, it's a balance of taking in what the student has to say and also grounding that in reality of what needs to be done for the academic integrity of the course, for appropriate progress in knowledge and competency as well, too. So I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions because I've kind of thrown a lot at you.
Do we have your permission to use the handout?
Anything I have given you is yours. You can reorder it, resequence it, put it in a back bin, do whatever you want to do that works for you. Yes, you can use any of this. Absolutely. And the end of course report, I got approval from my program chair to go ahead and use that as part of this presentation. She said, fine, absolutely. So yes, you can certainly do that. Another thing too, if you're a Quality Matters reviewer, you have an opportunity to use the internal review, self-review rubric. So some of this, well, that piece will actually guide you through some of this. So you have the option to use that, okay? If not, then you can use some of these broader questions that I've identified. Other questions? Well, I think I finished early. Well, thank you all very much for coming, and I appreciate having the opportunity just to share a little bit of tools and tips.